if I have a gap, how can I close it?
Generally, your super balance is the highest it ever was the day you retire, which means that the stakes are higher, right? And the opportunities are also highest when it comes to investment decisions.
When it comes to how to pay though, this is the most common question. Hi and welcome to Super Insider, the podcast that is here to talk to you about super, retirement and all things money. I'm Josh Van Gestel, Senior Manager of Education here at ART, and I'm joined today by Ruth Weaver. Hello Ruth, how are you?
I'm really well, Josh. Thanks for having me.
Now today we're going to be talking about some of the many questions that we get from members always at our education seminars around retirement. But you well know that we get asked hundreds of questions. So today we are going to try and group them into 4 key areas, aren't we? Can you talk about what those 4 key areas are?
I can. Generally, when we get questions, we do work really hard at ART to try and theme them so that we're using our members' questions as a way for us to determine what are these key areas that people really want to learn about. And we tend to find that they bundle into 4 areas.
Yep.
The first is around planning for retirement, so some questions around what do I need to do to get ready and to start planning. Then it's around growing for retirement, so what are the things I need to do to grow my superannuation to be better prepared. Then it's about paying myself at retirement. I'm here. Now what? How do I start to get the money out of the system? And then there's also lots of questions from people who are already in retirement. How do I live a fulfilling retirement and thrive in retirement?
And start to enjoy it. Now, before we talk about all of that though, please be aware that what we're going through today is a general advice nature only. So if you've got any questions or want to go a bit deeper on any of this, we really encourage you to explore things further and also reach out to us for some guidance or advice. Now, Ruth, you talked about those 4 areas that we group, and within each of them would be lots of questions and people not really knowing where to start. So the first one we talk about starting on is that planning. So when we are talking about planning, what does that even mean? You know, how do we unpack that?
There's a lot of work in planning, and I would say this is probably the most important part. Planning is really about determining where am I now? In other words, how much super do I have? Am I on track? But then it's trying to determine, and where do I need to be? And then trying to figure out if there's a gap in between where you are and where you need to be. Where you need to be is where the work has to happen, right?
Yep.
So it's about really understanding, what does my superannuation need to do for me in retirement? Is it my only source of income? Will it be a primary source of income? Remember, some individuals won't be relying wholly and solely on super, in which case it doesn't need to play as big a role.
So for them, they might have the age pension or other assets.
Or other assets. But for many people, superannuation will be the primary source of income during retirement. So when you're thinking about something that needs to be the primary source of income, the obvious question is, well, how much income do I need to generate from this source?
So maybe let's go there first.
Yeah.
So in thinking about how much income do I need, how do I start to tackle that? What should I be thinking about?
There's no easy way to do it. I think the obvious point is, well, what's your current lifestyle look like, and what do you want your retirement lifestyle to look like, and how would that translate then into income? There's a couple of rules of thumb I think we can go off. Look, there are benchmarks out there. The ASFA retirement standards, for example, set a benchmark for individuals, and that will give you a guiding point. So for a couple, you're looking at somewhere around 73,000 a year if you wanted to have a comfortable lifestyle, for example, in income. And if you're a single person, that sits at about 50,000, and those numbers will vary depending on the updates. And then it's about determining, well, what does comfortable mean for me? I mean, for some individuals, they will say, well, if we're a couple, 73 sounds pretty good. We probably wouldn't even need that. And there'll be others that would say, well, look, that's probably falling short. We have some great plans for travelling internationally and for doing some really exciting things. There might be a couple of years we need more than that.
And we're also seeing a lot of people are now going into retirement still carrying debt or maybe even going into retirement where they're still working out what they're doing or what they're needing or health needs and different things. So although you can start to get an idea, it still always comes back to you as an individual, doesn't it?
It does, and it's about determining, number one, what do I want to do? Looking at personal factors. Will we have debt? Will we have dependents? Are you part of a couple or are you single?
Yep.
Will you be combining assets and splitting costs? Or will you be bearing all the costs yourself as an individual?
So in thinking about that planning step, and yes, there's those guides like the ASFA standards. What else do we have, though, that people can start to use to picture or illustrate what their retirement might look like?
I usually say to people, don't wait until close to retirement to do this step. This is using our forecaster, for example. And, every fund has forecasters. There's lots of them out there, just a calculator. The forecaster that we have really helps people to see, based on where they currently are, what the forecast for what their retirement might look like depending on what age they want to retire. And the age you decide to retire will play a really important part as well. Obviously, the younger you decide you want to retire, the more money you're going to need to fund that. So the forecasters allow you to have a little look at what would happen if I was to continue doing what I'm doing now and then decide to retire at this age on this income. It will tell you whether you're on track for it or not.
And then thinking as well about your life expectancy and how long that might need to last for. So when you go through the forecaster process, you said that what it will really then highlight is the gap.
Yeah.
So the forecaster is saying where you need to be, your balance tells you where you are, and that's where we then think about that second grouping of questions around, well, if I have a gap, how can I close it? So I know it's a bit of a simple question that I'm asking, probably a very complex answer. But where should people start to think about growing their retirement, even if it's only a year or so in front of them? What can they be doing?
Look, there's generally two levers with superannuation that you have at your disposal. One is there opportunities to get some money in there, some additional money? And there are different ways to do that. So that's the first one. And the second one then is to think about how that money is invested. And is it invested in a way that's going to help you achieve your goals? What I would say with the forecaster, yes, it does help you to have a bit of a visual as to where you are versus where you will be if you take no action. But the forecaster has tabs on there that allow you to change around as well. So, for example, if you did want to make contributions, you can put that into the forecaster and it will show you the impact that would have, as well as changing investment profiles. And, obviously we don't know investment returns in advance, but it does work off a bit of a guesstimate, if you like, or a bit of a benchmark that we would use. And you can see the difference that changing profiles might have for your balance as well.
I think that's really important, especially in terms of investing. What we tend to see is a lot of people get to retirement and almost close the door on investments or get very concerned and almost short term with their investments. But the reality is that we know once you retire, you might still have a 20-25 year investment timeline in front of you.
That's right. And generally, not always, but generally, your super balance is the highest it ever was the day you retire, which means that the stakes are higher, right? And the opportunities are also highest when it comes to investment decisions, and the returns you're likely to generate can be incredible when it comes to sustaining your superannuation balance. So remember, even though you might be getting close to retirement or at retirement and drawing money out, that money is still working for you.
That's
so the money that you're not drawing out is still in there and working really hard.
So we've really summarised contributions in investments at a very high level. You're thinking about, right, well, that sounds okay, but how can I find out more? What would you say to any of our members that think, right, I do need to do something? What's the next steps I take?
I would absolutely encourage members to keep an eye out for any seminars or webinars that we're hosting.
Bit self-indulgent,
yeah. But we do go into a lot of detail around the contribution strategies in particular, because there's some brilliant opportunities, particularly as you're closing into retirement, that you can take advantage of. But remember, contribution strategies don't stop once you retire, there's still opportunities
Things
to get
like
money
the
into.
downsizer
Exactly.
contribution.
There's some lovely conversations to have around feeding money in. And it's just opening up the conversation and exposing you to the things that you don't know. You don't know what you don't know, right? So sometimes coming to these webinars and seminars, whilst you might not grasp everything and maybe there's only certain areas you want to know about, there might be areas that you never even knew to ask about that you might become aware of through these programs. And then the other thing I would say is, if you don't want to participate in those kind of things, there's a lot of opportunities to self-learn as well.
Yep.
You don't need to go through the live versions. These things are always available on demand.
Webinars, videos,
Videos.
Yeah.
And then there's calculators. They are, and I'll go back to the forecaster, but there's other calculators as well. I think they are a brilliant way to get the mind thinking about, okay, well, if I move the dial here, this changes this way. How? How does that change? And why does that change so much? And that's a great starting point. So a contributions calculator, for example, on the website will help you determine the impact making different types of contributions might have.
And the different options available to you. Where you might want to go. So I think the overarching thing that we often see with seminars and even our online assets is that people do walk away with two strong motivations. Firstly, that they feel more confident and comfortable. Might still have questions they need answered, but starting to piece it together. But we also get this overwhelming sense, actually about 4 in 5 of our participants tend to say to us, they've got an idea of what action they want to take. But can I delve into the area that we get most of our questions about? Okay, you've planned, you've grown your super as much as you can. When can I start to access it?
Yeah. This is probably one of the most common questions. And going back to questions, I would say to everyone listening, if you walk out of a seminar or a webinar or after watching a video with more questions than you came in, that is a success.
That's a great thing.
Right? That's what you need to be doing, because now you're finding out areas that you probably didn't even think of questioning before. So that's one thing to be mindful of. The question about when can I access super is probably the most common one. And look, it's getting a little bit easier for us to answer that now, because there has been some changes to that. And preservation age now is typically age 60.
And preservation age is basically the age you can first start tapping into your super.
In layman's terms, preservation age is the age at which you're legally now allowed to think about accessing super. So whether you're working or not working, once you reach the age of 60, the shackles start to come off a little bit, if you like, and there is an avenue. You might not be able to access it all or as much as you want if you're still working, but there's certainly avenues to access some once you get to the age of 60.
And again, it's a lot of detail to unpack, but what are the different ways in which you could start to access your super when you reach that preservation age?
Well, look, if you're still working and you've reached age 60, there's really only one channel, and that's through the transition to retirement strategy. You will be limited to 10% per annum. But
and you're taking that as income?
You are, You're able to access up to 10% of your superannuation through the transition to retirement. And there's reasons people might go down that path. It might be because they want to scale back working hours. It might be because they actually want to take advantage of making additional contributions into super, and that might sound contradictory, but there is some reasons you might use the transition to retirement to actually increase your superannuation. And maybe there's also reasons that you just want to access some of the money for reasons that are completely separate to superannuation, for personal reasons. So if you're still working and you're 60, there are discussions you can have there.
And if you've turned 60 and you're not working?
And if you've turned 60 and you're not working, well then the super is fully the shackles are completely off. You do have full access, and I should say as well, it's full tax-free access once you've reached the age of 60. Now, one of the concerns people have is making the retirement decision. It feels quite a large decision to make, and it's not a forever decision.
And I think that's a really important point. There's probably two things people should really realise. And that's firstly, the amount you need, what your needs are in determining that are going to be completely unique to you. And likewise, the way you want to access your super, what you're going to be using it for, how you're going to be using it, whether you choose to take it as income or as a lump sum withdrawal or whatever that may be, is again going to be unique. I think very often people almost get fixed on this, well, what do I have to do? How's it work?
Yeah.
And it's actually giving yourself some freedom to explore it and see what works for you.
I think the other misconception, and we hear this a lot as well, is the assumption that you have to do something. You actually don't. So, if you're a part of a couple, as an example, the reality is you're probably not both going to retire on exactly the same day. That means often one will retire before the other and there's still an income coming into the household. You may not need to access your super the day you retire, and maybe you've got assets outside. You can leave it there, and by leaving it there, it is still invested and it is still gaining investment returns and growing for you. So you can think about leaving it there until you're ready to access. You do not have to take it.
And that's interesting. You could, in that scenario, almost have someone bringing in employment income, you having your super there if you want it. Age pension could be coming into the mix. Again, I think it goes to that point. Every person's plan, needs, income is going to be unique. So let's say that you get those first three buckets right. You planned right, you grew, you're starting to access your super. We then talk about thriving in retirement to really wrap things up. What do we mean when we say we want our members to thrive in retirement?
Thriving in retirement is pretty much all around your well-being. We want people to enjoy retirement. And, thriving isn't just about having lots and lots and lots of money. It's about feeling in control about what you do have. When you get to retirement, your superannuation is your superannuation. And we don't want people at that point to feel despondent or despaired about what they have. It's all about now making sure that you're in control of this asset that you've got and that you're comfortable with the strategy that you've got in place, but you're not complacent. You're also, engaging regularly with your super fund still. You're maybe having a chat to a financial advisor to see if your strategy or your plan might need to realign, and it's being just in control of it all is so important.
When you're thriving in retirement, it's also recognising your retirement journey is going to go up and down. Your income may go up and down. Investment markets may go up and down. It's not like you lock it in one day and then you just go on a path.
But it's also about thinking from a well-being perspective. It's thinking about your emotional and mental well-being. What are you doing during retirement to keep yourself fulfilled emotionally and mentally? And that's a big shift from working, particularly if you go from full-time work to full-time retirement. There is a small number who find that amazing, but there is a huge number who find that quite challenging, actually.
And like I think, on the day I retire, I'll never speak to you again. Is that how
That's why you'll be challenged. That's why you'll find it hard. You'll miss me. But it is a real challenge for retirees, is just disconnecting from that social side of work and making sure you've got something on the outside to keep yourself fulfilled.
That's right. That sense of community as well. So,
but then there's the physical well-being, having enough financial independence to be able to do things like join a gym or like engage in sort of programs to help you feel well, like see the GP when you want to, or look after your health. That's what thriving is. It's about having the emotional and mental well-being, but also having enough money to be able to look after yourself physically. And then, of course, there's the financial well-being piece, which is where a huge part of that superannuation will contribute to.
And that's a whole other discussion about really how we want our members to feel fulfilled with their income. We see a lot of people in retirement almost shut up shop it.
But afraid to spend it. And it's so important that people remember, you've worked hard for this. This is your money to spend. And maybe just feeling a little bit of freedom that you don't have to always pass all of your wealth on. You don't have to be afraid to spend your superannuation either. And we don't want anybody leaving this earth with more money the day they've passed away compared to the day they retired. That's not thriving in retirement.
Beautifully said. So if we were to think about those key actions for planning, we thought getting onto a forecaster, starting to really
test.
But also yourself, learn more, explore more, whether that's coming to a seminar or getting online and looking at information. What about growing?
Growing is really looking at those two big strategies around getting money into the fund, but getting it in the right way to take the advantage of the tax concessions that might be available to you. But also recognising that, people are feeding money into superannuation a lot later in life now, so you can still effectively get money in even if you're retired right up to 75. Making sure you're aware of the opportunities there to feed more money in if you can.
And then paying yourself in retirement and thriving, how would you actually think about going about that?
Look, paying yourself is really determining where other potential sources of income might come from, how you like to currently look after finances, how frequently you'd like to get paid. You've actually got a lot of control over how often you get paid, how much you get paid, and you might decide to change that. So really looking at the household and determining whether lump sum access is better than the regular flow of income coming in on a fortnightly or monthly basis. And as I said, maybe it's just putting a bit of a stall on it and determining that you don't need to tap into it straight away, and it might be just sitting there for you until you do need it.
And ultimately, I think to make sure that someone's enjoying their retirement, their savings, their money, it's also reaching out to us and making sure you're getting guidance and also accessing our advisors if you're really at that decision point of needing to do something. So if you want to come to one of our seminars or online events, how do you do it?
Well, the first thing is to just hop on the ART website and go to events and seminars. I'd also suggest keep an eye on your inbox, because if we are going to be in your local area doing a seminar, we will be inviting you directly to that or to a webinar. And maybe keep an eye out at your workplace. We do visit many, many workplaces as well, so we'd encourage people to keep an eye out there too.
Got a big year ahead of you.
We have a big year, and we hope we see lots of our listeners. And remember, if you leave with more questions than you came in with, that is Fabulous. A success for you.
Yes. Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you all soon.